the end of 2006, the National AIA was going to celebrate its 150th anniversary in the subsequent year. And they challenged all of its chapters all across the country to come up with a plan that could be included in the Blueprint for America. And that plan would involve communities and primarily show that architects can be leaders in their communities and that architects have skills which communities can use.
The premise of what we're trying to do here with the AIA150 Task Force is to not only create a good design that will get built, but also show or show a process that is good for development anywhere in the state.
Has it been successful in creating a vision for the site? It absolutely has. Has it been successful in stirring people's imaginations, their hopes and dreams and desires for this underutilized piece of property in town? It certainly has. There's a buzz in town and people are just waiting to see what's going to happen. And I think that in of itself is very, very successful in a community like Durham.
New Hampshire has tremendous assets and resources. We have the classic New England village, and our planning doesn't even allow us to recreate the classic New England village. So we decided that what we would do is we wrote to every single community in New Hampshire, which is something like 238, and we asked them if they would like us, the New Hampshire chapter of the AIA, to come into their community and help them with a project in their community, pro bono.
What we wanted to show was that there is a sense of community involvement in any development, because development in general doesn't necessarily deal with a piece of land or a building or whatnot. It touches a wide variety of pieces in the town and sometimes even a region. And so what we wanted to do was kind of broaden that outreach to the general, just the citizens of a particular town, planning board, zoning, the selectmen, conservation, the abutting properties, and really view how a development touches all of those people. And also in coming up with the solutions of what a particular development's going to be, everybody kind of gets a say-so, and that's really the essence of consensus building and the approval process in a town.
And the reason we selected Durham was, number one, they had already commissioned a planning group to see what could be done with what is known as the Mill Plaza, which is about a 9.5-acre site right in the middle of town.
The parcel holds a tremendous amount of potential, not only for the economic development that could occur on site, but the impact it can have on our main street in downtown Durham as well. And our hope over time is that we can do a better job integrating what happens at the plaza location, which is just off of Main Street, with what is happening on Main Street. And our goal long term is to really integrate those two much more closely.
I think we need clean and sustainable economic development in this town, and this is one area that is underutilized. The neighborhood has to buy into this for it to be successful, because they're impacted by this. So this has to work from an economic development point of view and return on investment point of view. And regarding how connected we are with town, I think that's an important issue as well.
The site for this effort is really at a wonderful location for this community, where it is part of the downtown, the village, directly adjacent to the university. And so you have 15,000 people who are in a walking environment on a daily basis, who are in search of things off campus. looking for those opportunities to be able to walk 5 minutes, to be able to get to the store, to be able to get to a restaurant, to do that quick errand, to meet somebody that is part of what we would see at the university as being an important feature of collegial life. We don't want to just keep people on campus. We want to be able to have that connection between the downtown and the university. And so this 9-acre parcel is a wonderful opportunity, not only in what it is today, but in terms of providing a higher level of vitality for the community in a way that can serve the town as well as the campus.
Durham has had a reputation of being hard to do business in for developers. The community is a very thoughtful community, it's a very deliberative community, and everybody has a lot of ideas, and strong ideas at that, about how they'd like to see the community grow and develop over time. The town of Durham, New Hampshire had been looking for many years for a home for our public library. Our library is presently located in a storefront, a strip mall, in the Mill Plaza location, which is just adjacent to our downtown compact area. For many years, the library had struggled with sites. We looked at locations in town as well as out of town. And it was at a library board of trustees meeting where the trustees invited some local business people who were asked to provide some creative ideas on ways in which we could move forward with a new library. And we're operating on a tight budget here in town, but we have high ideals of what we'd like to see in a new library. In working with our planning office and our town council in Durham, we formed over time a resolution which created a committee called the Mill Plaza Study Committee, which was charged with looking at this property and coming up with a vision for its redevelopment. We had, as a town, identified a chairperson to our local Mill Plaza committee. His name was David Howland.
Yeah, we had a lot of challenges to work through. As I've said many times, when we started out around that table on the very first day, and this was before the AIA came, the town council, I think, had the foresight to include a group that had, as I've put, a lot of different food groups. So, as I've mentioned, we had the business community, we had the university, we had the faculty neighborhood, which is the neighborhood nearest to the plaza. There was a representative of the Historic District Commission and the Planning Board, and also the library. And so, right off the bat, there were some areas that we knew we had to work with. Issues of, well, do we want housing on the site or not? How much traffic could be needed, or where would the cars go? Would we have a library or not? Or for that matter, we also had a representative from the town council. Would we have a town hall there? And those are all things that everybody had some pretty distinct opinions on, and we needed to be able to work through those.
This way, we had an opportunity through the design process for the abutters to talk to the designers and say why they were designing the site in a certain way. We learned a lot in this. We learned a lot in this project, and interestingly, what we learned is very often that what the neighborhood wanted turned out to be better for the development. In the old planning model, they don't get a chance to speak up until the plan is on the table, engineered, and in a public arena where so many decisions have already been made that it is really difficult for the developer to make any changes. In our model, what we're trying to do is to get all the information out on the table so people can trade one idea for another idea. So people can say, okay, if I can have that, then I'll back off on this demand. And now I understand why you need this, and it makes more sense to me, and I can see the value. I may not like it, but I can see the value, and I'm not going to object anymore.
This is, the redevelopment of the plaza is not something, I don't think it's anything that's going to be perceived as imposed on the town by outsiders. It is something that's invited by the people who live in this town for their benefit.
But I was struck by the opportunity that we have for some creative work to be done where we can incorporate the natural environment with bricks and mortar.
How could our wonderful creative architects and people with vision make something more attractive and mixed use and kind of bring in these elements that everyone's talking about out of the structures that are already there? I think that would be an incredibly interesting, creative challenge. And I think from a sustainability and environmental perspective, that's definitely the route you would want to take rather than just scrap it, throw it away, and start fresh.
As we look at the plaza, we have to be very careful to know what's coming around us that's already approved, and what that effect is going to be on retail, not only currently in the plaza, but as we're planning for new retail coming in.
The one thing that we did, which is probably for any community that wants to do this, this is the essential element. We hired a facilitator. And for us, we put out an RFP for a facilitator. And we got quite a few responses because there were a lot of people in New Hampshire who do facilitation. But we went outside of the New Hampshire community and went to Cambridge for the Consensus Building Institute for professional facilitators who were planners by trade. And this is a key element because Patrick Field, our wonderful facilitator, was a neutral element. You could whisper in his ear things you would never tell your fellow citizen or somebody from the New Hampshire AIA.
So I think in this kind of process, which has lots of moving parts and small groups and large groups and formal groups and informal groups, facilitator has a diverse role. So clearly the facilitator can be of assistance if there is a town committee, like the Mill Plaza Study Committee, to help move things along, facilitate parts of the discussion, and work closely with the chair or co-chair to plan agendas, think about how to make the meetings effective, and actually manage differences, tensions, issues, or just complexity in the meetings.
There are some towns where battle lines are drawn, vested interests, and people from the business community or the government, might not be getting along. And in a case like that, it could be a lot harder to build bridges. And we started in Durham. I think we have as much debate and conflict as perhaps the next town, but at the same time we have a pretty well-run government and a good deal of citizen participation. So I would say we started with some pretty good soil.
The first facilitation had to go on between the Mill Plaza Study Committee, which had been authorized by the town council, and the New Hampshire AIA. We had a little different vision of what this process was going to be. There can be no single interest in a project. It will fail unless all the interests are included. So Patrick helped us educate the Mill Plaza Committee people that it was crucial that we had to have the cooperation of the landowner and of economic studies, all sorts of other issues that they hadn't really considered as yet. So that was our facilitator's first job. And that worked out extremely well because we did agree on a common goal. Then Patrick would facilitate all of our community meetings. He also went out and visited every small organization within the community, conservation groups and economic development groups and the planning board and any organization of more than 3 people Patrick went to visit. And we wrote up all reports of all of these visits. So we have a tremendous amount of information constantly being generated.
There's a role clearly when the committee, if there is one, seeks to engage the larger community in broad public meetings, in simply moderating and running a good public meeting and knowing the issues well enough from the committee to be able to do that. There's clearly the informal kind of meetings or planning that gets together, whether there's an agenda planning committee of the committee like the Mill Plaza Study Committee, whether there is, in fact, work that needs to be managed between the consultants and the committee and managing some of those tensions that will certainly arise, as well as the informal piece, very important, of which town council people, town administrators, the kind of official bodies are trying to engage informally and trying to understand and perhaps sometimes influence or be influenced by the work of the committee. And so there's informal conversations and helping with those as well. That's the role of a facilitator.
What our primary goal was to come up go through the consensus building process, get all the issues on the table, and then from there deal with all those issues in formulating the design process. So what we did was we had 3 specific teams that worked independently of each other, that had their own, heard all the same issues, but came from different backgrounds, different experiences to come up with their version of what this project could be.
I'm one of the members of what locally is known as the Midnight Oil design team, composed of myself, Bill Schoonmaker, Robbie Woodburn, landscape architect, Walter Rouse, a designer, and Nick Isaac, also an architect. We're all Durham natives, and originally we were asked to be a part of this process before AIA150 was involved in order to help the Plaza Committee come up with an idea of how the plaza could be redeveloped. When AIA150 got involved, we became one of 3 teams, the other 2 being from LaValle Brenzinger and JSA, both terrific architectural firms here in New Hampshire. It's been really a fascinating process. As Midnight Oil, we did some work for the town a number of years ago, so this was a chance for us to get together and do something together again.
The great thing about having diverse teams coming in and giving different solutions is that when you live in the town, you look at things a certain way. And even as a designer, we all try to not get stuck in one particular method of looking at things. But when you live there, it's different. But so by being able to see what different teams do and their different approaches to how things can look, the possibilities become endless and then very exciting, and then it really kind of gets animated and ideas come and go, and that whole idea of the challenge of, you've done a design, but then things change and you do another design. It's really exciting, and it's really kind of fun.
We had 3 design teams work on 3 designs, and the design processes for the first 2 rounds, each design team worked on different designs, and then the final round they all came together and did it.
I think it takes a big amount of community buy-in. In this case, everybody seems to want this project to work because they don't like the status quo. That alone, I think, helped bring people together. You have certain people that want to do certain things one way or the other, but even they were, they seemed to be willing to work together to try and to get to something. It's, if you give me a little of this, I'll give a little on that kind of thing, which is compromise.
This is kind of no holds barred, especially the first part of the process when they gave us a blank slate and they said, come up with an idea. We want to see what your best idea is, and we were able to do that. And now the process is moving. We have more restraints, which is fine, because then you still have your core idea, but you have to prove that it's good, and you have to make it work within the restraints that you're given.
Oh, I think we accomplished a tremendous amount. The past year, I'd say we've been at this for a year and a half, but the past year has been wonderful in terms of letting everybody, in the community who wanted to have an opportunity to say what they'd like to say. And I guess it's hard to know where to start, but in this process we brought people together in focus groups, so in a safe space with their peers to talk about issues that matter to them. So for the business community, for the neighborhood, the university, and others. And that was that was a great start. And then we combined that with the regular meetings, which people could take a look, at what assumptions we came in, what sort of vision was coalescing, and then ultimately in the process where they could work with the architects and see their ideas come to life in color and in drawings, and take a second look at some of their assumptions and some of ours and say, okay, well, I know we thought that maybe this was the direction to go, but maybe not. Maybe we want to take another look at it from another way. So that iterative process was fantastic, and especially giving everybody a chance to come out and participate.
I want to express how appreciative I think we all are of the amount of effort that the 3 teams put into this. And it's very easy to quickly jump into how come you didn't do this and why did you change that. And And so I just think it's unbelievable. I can't imagine how much time that you spent on this, and I just wanted to really thank all of you and give you a round of applause.
This is very process-oriented, more than any specific project that I can remember being involved with. I think it has to do with the fact that we're trying to engage a very wide range of stakeholders here and to get input from a very broad spectrum of people. And to that extent, that's tough. So I hope that we can create some kind of enthusiasm, some kind of vision for what could be there, a framework for moving toward that, and flexibility that allows them to respond to unforeseen conditions or unforeseen circumstances now.
Does it have to be an all or nothing? Can there be some property owners that say, oh, yes, okay, and then others no? So it can be all kinds of designs depending on...
Is this all going to happen at once, or is there going to be a plan for phasing this over time? In other words, is the idea everything gets built at once, or is a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan, or what?
Everything was in the open. Every meeting was open. The website had everything on it, drawings, meeting notes, everything. We spent many, many hours just talking to people and listening to people. So our goal was to show the community that with collaboration you can dispel myths, because every community, change generates incredible number of myths. And the Mill Plaza going from 58,000 square foot to what will probably be somewhere in the 250,000 square foot range when it's done, generated a lot of fear in the community. Too much traffic, too much density, too much this, too much that. And through our charrette process and our drawing process, using the 3 very highly skilled design teams that we had, people began to understand how you design. And that design is very flexible. Design is in response to the needs, not just the needs of the developer, but the needs of the entire community. And I think if we accomplished any one thing in Durham, we accomplished developing a consensus among people that haven't had consensus in a long time, particularly about a planning process.
Is this heading in a direction that you can imagine is something that you feel pretty good about, with obviously concerns and issues to be dealt with? I'm going to count roughly 40. I'm not going to do an exact count.
Usually the developer or the owner of the property would come in and see me. We'd have what we call an informational meeting. He'd let me know what he's thinking about doing. I let him know what the ordinance allows and what it doesn't allow. And then they have an option of doing a couple different things. One, there are 2 pre-application review phases before you get a site plan application to the planning board. But they're optional. It's a conceptual and a design review. Some do that, some don't. So if they do that, they would go through those 2 phases before a formal application, then they would apply to the planning board and just go through the planning process. A lot of times we just get the formal application because it's really shortened. The time for the public to speak is at the public hearing portion of the planning board process, and it really doesn't come close to what we did with the AIA150.
They spend an awful lot of money up front before they even get to the planning board or the approval process, and then ultimately it becomes an adversarial confrontation with the boards, whether it's zoning, whether it's planning, whether it's conservation, and they do this all the time, and that's typically the way it's done. We're trying to change that mindset.
I think any time that there's a process that is suggesting a major change within a community center, it clearly raises a lot of questions on everybody's behalf. And so what this process did, from my perspective, was to really offer all of those different perspectives a forum to be able to articulate their concerns, and a way for them to be able to react to a whole multitude of ideas. And to me, one of the real strengths of this particular process was, unlike a typical process, was to see a multitude of ideas come forward in a very dynamic way. So that gave people great possibilities.
The advantage to all that is you really begin to tease out interests and concerns early. You allow people to see the process as it's happening. You get people in a mode which is actually hard for the public, which is they're not just reacting to proposals, but they're becoming part of the team to think through problems. And the great advantage of that is rather than having a proposal, deciding you don't like it, then fighting it, you say, okay, if you don't like that proposal, well then help me with this one. What's your interest? Let's do this one. And they get to see that evolution and engage in the hard process of development and architecture and economics and site planning and ordinances and all those.
Every project is different, every development is different, but I think if they realize, whether it's from the town side or from the private side, the developer side, to know that this process, if followed to some degree in whatever their development is, will make a difference in streamlining the process, in enhancing the project as a whole, and whether it starts from the town side of things or whether it starts from the developer side, it really doesn't matter. But to get everybody on board, all the stakeholders on board in some capacity, to go through this collaborative process to get to a point where we have a project to build, everybody's on board, it works for everybody to a degree, and we can now go build it. That's pretty much what we want to get to.
And what often happens in this traditional process is the developer has done a lot of that work, shows up, presents, a lot of that thinking's happened, but no one's seen it. No one necessarily trusts the developer because they've done it, because they do have, of course, an economic interest. And so there's an immediate negative reaction, no matter how good it is. And here you're trying to engage people in what typically is behind the scenes, upfront and pretty openly. And that has some great advantages for trust, for engagement, for new ideas, for solving people's interests in a more effective way.
As silly as it may appear, put it all out on the table. But then you need someone to help sort through those ideas and get people to talk to each other and get people involved in the process. It can't be sort of a free-for-all. That's very difficult. People need a framework in which to understand the process. There's an order to the process. I mean, you start here and you end up over here. I mean, there's a lot of zigzag in between, but people need to understand. You don't worry about the color of the bushes when you're trying to figure out where the buildings go. You have to work your way through in an organized fashion, and that's where the trained professional and a lot of architects can do this extremely well. And in a community, if you're trusted, it's fine. But if you're in a community where there's a lot of dissension, then that outside facilitator becomes crucial.
I mean, ultimately, I think success will be if a project is built that meets at least the general principles and values of the work of committee, that's satisfying to the property owner or developer in terms of financial return, and that creates a sense of community that people are generally very proud and happy about. And I think that's really the ultimate measure of success.
I can't imagine somebody turning and saying this is a bad idea. I think we've proved it here in Durham through this exercise that it works, and there is a better way to do it than the way they're doing it now. And so that's what we're hoping to achieve.
I think that's a huge accomplishment in any town. To have the public that came out express such an opinion about a project that is going to be community changing. We're talking about the center of our little New England town, and that showed me just how far we'd come. And again, thanks to the hard work and of our designers and of our facilitators and of our committee having stuck together despite and also because of their interests and the huge circle of common interest that we had.
To have the community invested in it, have possibly the library there, and have that site that is very underutilized. It's an old 70s kind of strip mall, redeveloped and making it more of the downtown and just having it something everyone can be proud of. I'm really excited about that.
This process empowers the town council and the planning board to do their best work.